And welcome to the Dirt Racing series. We're going to jump straight back onto this with the racing having already started. And going with this C plus team time trial. Just going to have a quick look at the course. You're on TikTok course, 19.3 kilometers, and it's just going to be a straight team time trial and time trial bikes. Having a quick look at the league standings so far in this C plus division. We've got Herd leading the way, followed by Galaxy of Titans in second, and tight between them and Powerpuff Dirt in third, Electric Spirit Picklebacks in fourth, Cryogen Galileo in fifth. Going to be very tight for that last podium spot, and for second for that matter, so we'll see how they're getting on going into this. Having a quick look at the rider standings before we get in. At the moment we've got Scott McGonigal leading the way for Galaxy of Titans, and Joseph Gibson in second, Jesse McGibbon for Galaxy of Titans again in third, and Shane Alfreds for Herd in fourth. So it's big domination in the individual standings from Herd and Galaxy there. The Cryogen's Greg Fox in fifth. Let's jump straight into the racing for you. We're just following the Dirt Powerpuff team here. Just jump back up to the leaders, Herd. Seems like we have Team NL off first. Not quite sure. Well, there were 30-second gaps starting off. So 30-second gap. So it looks like that Team NL might have taken some time out of Herd. Perhaps those requests start early, or in fact, I suspect this Team NL have started off on 0 rather than starting on a delay. So this Herd team might have taken 15 seconds out of them, I'd guess. So following Herd here are our current leaders in the league. We've managed to get 8 riders out at the start, which is good to see. It'll definitely be an advantage. They've got in 2 seconds so far on Galaxy. We've got the riders here on the front. Seems to be Williams here coming through to take a pull. He's doing a bit more than the lead rider, around 3.2-ish. With the C plus category, we see these riders' FTPs are going to be around the 3.2 mark. Especially kind of in this end, we're going to be looking at 3 to 3.2 for a lot of these riders. So we'd like to see him pulling maybe 3.5 to 3.8. Especially with 8 riders, they should be able to do that for 30 seconds. They're just a little bit below here. Possibly they're trying to take it a little bit easy to begin with and pushing on as the course goes. They might be a little bit disorganised so far. There's obviously Varley taking a big push there to get to the front. Really good to see. And that was exactly what needed. It said 3 flat across the front there. It does seem they're going for very much a bunch tactic here. We might be better seeing them stretch out a little bit more. Which is what we saw Varley doing, pushing 4 watts per kilo bit there. Really impressive pulling. See Shane here coming through. Possibly to take over from Varley next. Currently they're now, I think they're actually 2 seconds behind, take it back in Galaxy, but they're now 1 second ahead after that really hard pull from Varley. See Shane flying here to come through. 6 watts per kilo for a bit there. He's going to have to be very careful with this gap behind, looking at 4 meters to Cook there. Williams has managed to hold it. Cook's pushing as well to hold that. Really well done to them. They say the magic number's 5 meters. If they go to 6 meters, see they're almost teetering with now. They're not getting any benefit from the draft. It's very much a cut and tide thing with Zwift. Maybe isn't the best way to do it, but very much once you're past 5 meters, you're not getting any extra benefit from the draft. Shane, they're pushing it hard again as they come to the little climb. See Team NL coming into it now. It's a little climb up in the middle of the desert. Yeah, go back, take a look at Galaxy now. So Galaxy is only with 6 riders, at least 6 right now. It's going to hurt them a little bit. A couple with 4 with disc wheels on, which is really important. It'll make a decent difference on this course. Lots of teams don't necessarily realise how big a difference they make on the flats. Might be slightly unfair, I'd say, especially given the high level unlock that you have for it. But really good here from Galaxy. Got a bit of structure clear to see. Stretched out, not too bunched up. There's a little bit of a bunching in the middle. But McGonigal's leading them up the climb here. As I spoke about earlier, with these C pluses, these climbs have a bit bigger impact. And generally, as you go down the divisions, you want to maybe load the climbs a bit more in terms of your efforts. Because of the speed difference. So you're down to about 38 here. And when we come into the steeper climbs, at about 4% Calder Salad Springs, and then towards the finish, you'll notice that impact a lot more. So the more they can pace their effort as to going harder up the climbs, the more advantage they're going to have time-wise. And so you see a lot more with these lower categories, that they push a bit harder on the climbs relative to their power than, say, the Bs or especially the As do. You might notice that sometimes the Bs push just as hard as the As up the climb, because at that point those numbers are going to be just as advantageous, but on the flats is where the A's, surprisingly, even though generally they're a bit lighter, that's where they take their real advantage. So looking at Dirt Powerpuff team here, got very much seem to be going for a pace line, which is good to see. It's like a lot of strong TTT rides. Got Svenja Scheller here. It's been out and about a lot, regularly TTing with dirt time chasers. A couple of other strong riders you recognise here, Festa. And see the difference just being able to kind of get into this pace line. They are a bit of time down on Galaxy so far, but again, I wouldn't read too much into these early times, especially for teams that may be a bit lighter. Might lose a bit of time on the flats, but gain a bit later on where the going gets tough, especially with 8 riders here versus the 4 of Galaxy ahead. They'll definitely be hoping to take some points on them in the league. So as we jump further back, we've got Electric Spirit behind. So we've got 6 riders for Electric Spirit. So far doing quite well. They've taken a couple of seconds out of Dirt Powerpuffs up ahead. They've got a bit of a stretched out line here, which is good to see. Maybe one dropping off the back. Just coming around the corner on the downhill. Got a little bit more downhill to go. But again, they don't hold the speed as much as those higher categories as well. But 47s-ish gaps opening up here could be really damaging. Just see Marsden towards the back. He's just within that gap. See, there he goes, pushing 4.5, 4 watts per kilo just to get it into really good to see there. He's done exactly as he should, pushing hard and then easing early so that he doesn't come through the front. He might slowly come through the front here because no one on the front is pulling, which they might be a bit frustrated about. That's definitely going to start to cost them a little bit of time with no one pulling there. But they did really well to begin with on that downhill. You see, they've taken another few seconds out of Dirt Powerpuff ahead. Going back to the Cryogen team, who were in 5th. And only 6 riders are getting. It's definitely something that starts to impact towards the second half of this course, as we talked about earlier. You've got a long climb into the finish of this course. And if you're down to 4 riders there or less, well, 5 riders or less, I was meaning to say, it can be really harmful, especially when you've taken a lot of pulls and you haven't had many to begin with. You start to see the fatigue really hitting in. Again, Cryogen seem quite organised here. Seem level on time there with Electric Spirit ahead. These 30-second intervals between teams and gaining time on the team behind. Dirty Mojo chasing down this team, Makango. But they're down to 3 riders. That's definitely going to be high. You can see they're 14 seconds down on Makango. Steve Fenn here, very strong rider, but not much you can do with only 3 riders versus bigger teams. You see the CLS, very strong TTT team across the board, just chase them down. They've got a bit of a gap opening up here, and Breen's pushed very hard to close it. Problem here, when he's pushed so hard to close it, is that Tapper behind and Mark just got gapped a little bit. Tapper was dropping back and managed to fill in the gap okay, but you see this gap again has opened up and they're onto a downhill. It's going to be very hard for them to close it. That's why I say the important part of this downhill is making sure they're all together. It can be really harmful when they're not, because these gaps constantly open up. You see here Mark doing 3.5, 4 watts per kilo on a downhill. It'd be much better if he could relax and was able to do 2 like the rest of the team. See Tapper then also having to push. They're not quite moving back together. They're doing it a bit too individually, and that is costing them. They seem to be doing very well so far, gaining up on this Dirt Mojo team. Right, we've got TZH Cobras. We've opened a bit of a gap to CLS up ahead. So I think about 1 minute 10 down potentially, which is quite a large gap. I'm not quite sure what's happening. They seem to be, fairly organised, pulling on the front. Not quite sure what the cause of that is. Perhaps there was another team in a start in between, because that's a very big gap to have opened up early if it's the full 1 minute 10. See Garcia taking the pull on the front there. He's opening up a little bit too much on this downhill. See Brasa not quite holding their wheel enough, but they are gaining back a little bit. But again, it's 6-7 meters. So all those in the draft just having to do a bit too much work again. I see 2 riders there. It's going to be a very long day out for them, as we saw, but chased down by 3 of the coalition. 2-second gap between the 2 teams. So it's going to, at least they're going to have a close race between those. Be very interested to see how the impact of 2 rides versus 3 comes on later. Looking at 4-second gap at the moment. Suspect that's going to eke out a lot towards the end of the course. Working our way back towards the front, they should just be approaching the Calder Saddle Springs climb. You see Herd just on their way up it. So here we see 4.5 to 4 on the front here. Really strong from Team NL. And again, there's a noticeable gap, I was about to say, between them and the rest of their team, but that isn't the rest of their team. That's Herd chasing them down. As we saw, making good time early on them. They've really eked into it, but maybe a little bit too gentle from Herd here. I wonder if they're starting to suffer a bit. We're 14 minutes in. They're about halfway. 19.2 kilometre course, 10.3 in. I'd like to see at least 2% them going a little bit harder, taking advantage of the climb perhaps more. See Galaxy's taken 2 seconds out of them at the moment. I'm taking a little look at Galaxy as they start the climb. Well, start the climb, they're halfway up it. Sorry. Galaxy again around that 4.2 number, but with regular pushes. McGonagall pushing 5 there. We saw a little bit, a few of them going harder. Ellis doing well on the front there. Seems a bit of an inconsistent pace though. You want Herd have dropped Fisher on their riders, and Varley struggling to make it on before this downhill. He's pushing hard, but 6 metre Cook there seems to be dropping a little bit back, possibly filling in the gap so Varley can get back on. Very stretched out here. And we're going to see if they can hold these gaps into the downhill. Talked about it a little bit earlier, but you have this elastic band effect that tends to start to happen when gaps open up, as people try and close them and overcompensate. Rather than just pushing enough to get back on the back, they push hard and then only ease once they're connected, and that's far too late to start easing, as they then fly through the front and everyone jumps back together again into a bit of a bunch rather than a nice pace line. But Herd have dealt with this really well. See, they're all, there's a little bit of a bunch, but that's absolutely fine in the downhill. But generally they're stretching out when they can, and they're doing this really nicely so far. Taking a couple of seconds out of Galaxy there. You'll see as they come into this, see Richard there pushing very hard. And this one we want to see, that we're 55 kilometres now. Now that's a big number for a C plus team, and they want to hold on to that for as much as possible. That's why we might see him eking more time out of Galaxy. Just another second there. It's a fantastic pull here from Richard. And really good sportsmanship there from Herd, just letting Team NL know that someone's coming through them, sign the overtake. So Herd are going to push on a bit here, and Team NL should ease off slightly, just letting Herd get clear. You see Herd coming through nicely. Really well done from Herd. And straight back into the pace line. It's really good TTTing from them. Maybe didn't go as hard as I'd personally like up the climb, but they're doing everything else right. And it's really impressive to see. Let's see how they've managed. They've held that speed really well. Cook and pushing hard on the front over the climb, just carrying that speed into the downhill. Really well executed. And again, as they get to the bottom, we'd like to see him pushing hard again. Let's see if someone you want to start from mid-pack or the back, whoever's going to do it. See Gibson there coming through again. Absolutely marvellous there from Herd. Again, just holding that speed for longer. 5 to 6 watt per kilo is huge for C pluses. It's a really big effort. Going to be approaching the 1 minute numbers. And look at the speed. They're still holding with 50 kilometers an hour. That's exactly what you'd like to see from a good TT team. Herd are executing this to perfection. They're now 4 seconds up on Galaxy. I'm taking 6 seconds over that climb and into the downhill. They might have gained another second already here. See Galaxy there, just not doing quite the same to hold that speed. They're doing okay. They're holding a bit of speed, but they're not pushing quite as hard in the front. And again, it just starts to cost them a couple of seconds. And it's these 1 or 2 seconds that really make a difference, especially when you've got teams as close as this. It's when you all balance, doing close to cat limit numbers, the difference are these little kind of technical points, and this course is absolutely full of them. See, Dirt Powerpuffs coming into this, see if they can do the same holding that speed. They're 20 seconds down on Galaxy at the moment. It's going to be a bit disappointing for them with 8. But again, they can afford to lose riders into that final climb. So we know to see how they got on there. See them pushing up, but again, they're all towards the front, just doing 2 and a bit watts per kilo. There we go, Tom R taking a big stint there. Good to see he's not quite on the front, but he's going to work his way through. Svenja Stella also pushing through. And they're just not holding quite the same speed as the other teams. And around here, Herder are still at 52, 51. And Dirt are down to 48, 46. And again, it's not much. It's maybe a second or 2, but it starts to add up. See, Electric Spirit have closed Dirt down as well, taking 6 seconds out of them. So Dirt aren't going to be too happy with that. Electric Spirit, only 6 riders chasing down a team of 8. So they should be very happy with that performance so far. Marsden here taking them off. Big pull on the front, slightly inconsistent it seems with the power, but look at those watts. Really big numbers there from Marsden, really good to see. Probably looking at about 90 kilo rider. That makes a big difference to teams on TTTs. The extra weight on the flats is definitely advantageous, especially with the amount extra they're able to rest. A lot of these heavier riders are able to get almost into zone 2, if not lower sometimes, in the draft. And that makes a big difference for how aggressively they can take their pulls and how long they can pull for. A really long, strong pull there from Marsden. Just see one of the Powerpuff riders. It's just fallen back and Cryogen chasing them down. The Cryogen who are in 5th going into this. Can't quite see the times versus the teams around them. They were just really failing here. They're just 3 points down on Electric Spirit Picklebacks going into this, and currently they're 7 seconds back. So they're not going to be gaining onto them in this race, but 7 seconds is definitely overcomable if they put a really big dig towards the end of this course. And most of the teams are very well balanced. It's one of the great things of this series. We've seen so many teams so close together, and it makes it just so much more enjoyable when you're competing for every win. You know, it's all well and good winning, but nothing makes a win better than being in a very close battle for it. And equally, nothing makes a loss kind of more manageable than knowing you are beaten but narrowly by a really strong team who fully deserve it, rather than being trashed out the park. That's what it's been really good to see the organisers working to try and make sure that we don't have the kind of riders who can just comfortably win every single race by introducing a ranking limit. That means you move up 1 subcategory. See Powerpuffs here pushing hard on this little climb out of the underpass. See Fest doing a good job on the front, approaching up to 5 watts per kilo. And you see the numbers behind, 4.5, and coming through. There's a lot of saving to be had, which means you can afford to have a rider just going a bit harder on the front. It's the same for this entire section out of the desert. Sorry, we're just stuck for a few seconds on this herd rider. So you try and jump back onto them onto this long drag out of the underpass into the desert. So herd have got 12 seconds now of that Galaxy team. Executing really well. They're a little bit slow on the front, I'd say here. They might have done quite a big shift on that climb there and just struggling to hold on to it. They've got a lot of riders left. Still 6. It's really good to see that they have lost some. They have been pushing hard. 6 riders is about right if you started with 8 for this section. We'd like to see them probably lose another before that final sprint segment, and then 1 more in that. You see just a little gap, but look at this pace line. It's consistently organised. You know, it is sometimes getting close together. We saw there it's all just coming a bit together, especially Shane there, who's a bit too far back, possibly overcompensated. But again, look at his numbers. He was down to 1.3, 0.6 there. Really well done. You know, he's doing everything he can to make sure he doesn't come through the front and disrupt things too much. See Gibson there pushing hard. So no one's quite got his wheel. It's falling apart a little bit, but that's going to happen when you're pushing the limit. And they really are pushing the limit, as we saw with the time gap they've taken out of Galaxy in the last section. It's really impressive to see from them. And again, just stretching back out into that pace line, but the gaps have opened up. And again, the elastic band effect. They got too close. They've spread out too far. I'd happily put money that in about 20 seconds they're going to be too close again. It's such a hard thing to manage, especially on TT bikes. It was much easier before on road bikes when speeds were a little bit lower. And Herd doing very well. They're getting a little bit tight at the back. We're going to see I'll stay on a little bit longer to see if they get a little bit too tight as expected. And there we go. But yeah, not to take away from them, this has been a fantastic performance from Herd, and it's really good to see. These kind of things are really when you're fighting for those top positions on TTTs. Most teams don't worry about them. So going back to Galaxy, 10 seconds down on Herd. Again, they're just very bunched up again here. It's going to be costing them. Every time they're bunched up, they're losing 10, 15, 20 watts. Okay, they have to do that much harder than they would if they were stretched out in the right positions. But, you know, for a lot of teams, that's an acceptable loss. It's not going to make the world's biggest difference, and they'd rather have that and be safe and not let gaps open up, having to chase them down. So looking at Powerpuff, 12 seconds to Powerpuff. Unlikely, as Galaxy are 12 seconds ahead of Powerpuff. And it's unlikely that Powerpuff are going to be able to close that in this last 2 kilometers. But they can certainly give it a push, especially this Galaxy team. They've stretched out a bit more here on these 2%. That's one of the best things to do. If things aren't going right, use the uphills to separate it out and spread out. It means you can save a bit of power, and those at the front, possibly if you want to spread out from the front or the back, so the front can push a bit harder, increase your speed, take a bit of benefit from doing it and reorganising, or at the back those can take a bit of rest if they're going to drop back and try and spread it out. See this little gap again opening up. It isn't much, you know, it's 6 meters, but again it costs time and it costs energy, and it's these little changes that really sap teams. Really good performance here from Galaxy as they come into the finish. So taking a look at Powerpuff, they're down to 4 rides. They must have been really going hard up that climb, trying to chase down the gap. Just taking a look, we've got a couple of solo rides up the road and then down to Electric Spirit. So they've Electric Spirit are 2 seconds behind Powerpuff. That's going to be very tight coming into the finish. They're going to be really fighting hard. I wonder if that's how Powerpuff lost a few riders, closing that gap down and getting ahead of them. We're going to see very much a sprint out towards the finish. Who can dig deepest coming into the finish to get 3rd place. There's a following Herd on the final section. Still 6 riders left. They possibly could have gone a bit harder, but at this point they know they're ahead of Galaxy. They might have taken a bit of a look to the other teams behind and just saving themselves a little bit for the finish. Remember, we've got another race following this immediately onto Lady Liberty in New York, so the riders here might just want to save themselves a little bit, but it's a great performance here from Herd, and they're going to come through to take first on this team time trial. We've got Team NL following them behind. Not quite sure what their time's going to be based on where they started, but chasing them down is Galaxy. Galaxy are now only 10 seconds ahead of Dirty Powerpuff. Again, they don't seem to be going all out here, so perhaps they're saving their legs slightly. Russ is pushing hard on the front, so possibly just one of those lapses where no one quite knows who's on the front, or no one has the legs to go on the front, more likely at this stage. It's definitely something that happens. No one necessarily has the ability to take it on the front when they're all blowing hard. Really good here from Galaxy. Not quite managed to take Herd on the top, but they've stayed in position. They're probably going to take a 2nd place here, and that's going to be really good for them. So jumping back to this close positional race between Dirty Powerpuff and Electric Spirit. Powerpuff currently in 3rd in the league. Electric Spirit narrowly behind. And Electric Spirit is going to want to try and gain another point on them and close it down before we go into the KOM in New York. So Dirty Powerpuff here not hitting huge numbers, but keeping above 4 in the front, which is good to see. We want to see them around 4.5 here going into the finish, especially within 15 seconds from the line, which they are now. See them starting to raise it up. They're all getting above 4 watts per kilo. They should be starting to sprint with whatever they have left now. And Svenja really pushing hard from the back here. Really good to see. No one wants to be that 4th ride across the line. See Fester just holding on there. Seems to be struggling a bit, but really good from them. And it looks like 2 seconds gap currently to Electric Spirit over the line. Can Electric Spirit do more than them? It looks like they're not quite there at the moment. Electric Spirit need to put in a big dig here. They look like they're down to 4 riders. Looks like this little gap's opened up to EMEA. They really need to go hard if they're going to close, and it looks like they probably won't have enough here. It's been such a close race. They're probably trying to do a lot of work early. They just don't quite have the same numbers into the finish that the Dirt Powerpuffs had. Still a good performance there from Electric Spirit, getting ahead early and making it a very tough race. Look at Cryogen here, another 10 seconds back on Electric Spirit. I think they're fairly comfortable here in 5th place. Whether they know it or not is a different matter. And this is one of the kind of dilemmas of these TTTs, especially back-to-back, and it's such a great feature of this series, is that unless you know where you're standing versus the other teams, you can't necessarily afford to save yourselves, but you have another race starting in 12 minutes for them on Lady Liberty, so they don't want to be doing too much work and damaging their legs here. So it's a real dilemma of how you balance these 2 efforts back-to-back. So I'm pushing hard into the finish with 4, then Fox has just dropped off. They only need 4 over the line, so there's no point in them all going absolutely bonkers. A good finish from them. And following the CLS team. So the CLS team have lost time now to Cryogen, but have been storming through some of the other teams, and it looks like they've overtaken the Makango team, if I remember correctly. They were doing very well beforehand. Again, another strong pull here from Mark at the front. And it's very tight. They can see each other on the road. This definitely gives you that added spice going into the finish. Teams will want to jump back on and overtake into the finish line. Not strictly, you're not meant to kind of re-overtake unless you're definitely going quicker, and you're meant to try and avoid the draft. When you get into the last few kilometres, most of that goes out of the window, and teams are just gunning as hard as they can for your finish. It's very much forgivable. Let's see how we get on. We see CLS not really winding it up yet. Keeping around 3.5 on the front. I see again just doing a little bit more, but again most of these teams have just done a long climb into this desert. They're pushing hard. 27 minutes into the race, 500 meters left. A lot of them just won't have much left in the legs to give it here. 30 seconds from the finish for these C pluses. Maybe a bit less, more like 25-20 now. And Reed's taking it hard here for CLS. Still 2-3 second gap to Makango. They've not really gained too much here on this last section. You start to see Tapper here pushing through, starting to wind it up. It's right where we want to see the numbers. Let's see if they can hold onto his wheel now. See Green trying to get it with him, but Tapper's going to go. And see at this point he's just wasting energy. He's got a 10 meter gap. It's too much. And that hard sprint effort wasn't necessarily necessary and could have been used a bit earlier. We see Makango really pushing hard there. Really good to see from Hamblin, Burr and the rest of them. And look back at the Dirty Mojos here. Just 3 of them left, I believe. It's a good push here. Steve Fedden taking it hard. Robinson following and Mikar just behind. Nice and tight group here. They've been pushing it really hard. 3.5 doing more than most teams were at this stage. Really good to see. Steve just winding it up again. And Robinson starting to go now. 100 meters to go at most. So just winding it through the line. Really strong performance. Now it looks like they've taken time out of those teams behind them. Fantastic to see with just 3 riders. See this TZH very split up on the road. Not many of them are within drafting distance. See a bit of a gap first to second and second to third. Bit tighter there, but that first rider, Sergio Garcia, I suspect, up the road just doing absolutely nothing to help his team. Sad to see. Sure, he's doing great individually, but it's not an individual race here. It's a team series and a team time trial. And you should be doing everything you can to help make sure your 4th rider over the line gets across it as fast as possible. Looking back, Coalition are just 27 seconds behind. They started 30 seconds back. So Coalition are doing really well here. I think they've in fact, the Coalition I think started even further back. The team of 2 were ahead of them. This coalition have taken 30 seconds out of this TZH team. It's going to be disappointing. They just seem a little bit disorganized. See Sanchez here taking a bit of a pull in the front. Garcia, they're doing exactly as they should here. So I'm being intrigued to see where they lost so much time. But they're doing it quite nicely now. They've got back together. Not sure what went wrong in the section before where they were all spread out up the road. This is much better than going hard early. And that's exactly what I want to see in this finish. You don't want to see people sprinting towards the end. It should be a long, extended effort into the finish. Just emptying the tank. And if you have to roll over the line, that's fine. But you want to do it as early as possible, because that's where you're going to make the most gains for speed. It's not like a race where it's just a sprint finish. So jump back onto these coalition riders. And a really big effort to do this with 3 riders. So impressive. Should be very proud of this. Along with the PCH riders. They're a bit further down the road. So just coming through the line now. Starting to separate out. Good to see them getting through it and just finishing off, even if they just had 3 riders. Well done to them. We've got PCH coming through, just the 2 of them. Not doing too much here now. I think they know that they're going to be in last place of those who race. But again, that's still league points. It still counts. And they might have saved some rides, saved their legs for the next race. So after this, we're going to be jumping onto the B pluses on Lady Liberty. It'll be on a separate stream. Should have the links. I'll be able to check it out and the videos. Thank you very much for joining for this. As soon as across the line, we'll be jumping over as quickly as we can. Well done to all these C plus riders. It's a lot of good TTT riding. Not quite as well and slick executed as some of the Thursday teams, but you wouldn't expect it. This is a mixed series. It's not just about team time trials, and Herd especially dealt fantastically with this. Really good to see. Apologies for that. There we go, across the line. Well done to all these teams, and thanks for joining. We're going to be jumping onto the B pluses now.